In our quest to see a Messianic Niagara, one of the things that we encourage Christians to look into is that of keeping kosher. When we say kosher, we're referring to the biblical and traditional Jewish laws pertaining to what the people of God can and cannot eat. In Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14, God spells out exactly which animals, birds, seafood, and insects we are and are not allowed to eat. These laws represent the very basics of keeping kosher.
Firstly, in regards to land animals, we can only eat animals that have both a split hoof and chew the cud. While this may cover a whole list of animals, for the average Canadian this means that we are allowed to eat beef and lamb. Pork, on the other hand, is not allowed, since a pig doesn't chew the cud. In regards to birds, the Torah does not explicitly specify how to distinguish between permissible and non-permissible birds, but it does give us a list of prohibited birds. Essentially, this list is made up of birds that are scavenger birds. Generally speaking, domesticated birds are allowed, which means for the average Canadian, chicken, turkey, and duck are all allowed to be eaten. In regards to seafood, only creatures that have both fins and scales are allowed. For example, tuna, salmon, and flounder are all allowed to be eaten, whereas lobster, shrimp, crabs, and swordfish are not allowed to be eaten.
Finally, with the exception of 4 kinds of locusts, all other insects and animals are not considered kosher. Of course, these examples of permissible animals that I have given you are not an exhaustive list, so please contact us if you would like more information on which animals are and are not kosher. While it's certainly a great start to simply making these distinctions, there is more to keeping kosher than simply avoiding things like pork and shellfish.
Firstly, kosher animals and birds must be slaughtered according to the long-standing method of kosher slaughter, a method of slaughter that goes back to biblical times. This method of slaughter ensures that certain veins and fats that the Torah prohibits are removed. Not only that, this method of slaughter also ensures that the life of the animal is completely drained. In other words, the blood has been essentially removed from the meat.
The Torah explicitly forbids the consumption of blood, as it says in Leviticus 7:26. You are not to eat any blood either of a bird or animal in any of your dwellings. Interestingly, when deciding upon the minimum standard of what Gentile believers were to adhere to as they entered into the Jewish believing communities, the apostles included prohibitions of what is strangled and blood. That's found in Acts 15 verse 20.
That which is strangled and blood would be meat that has not been slaughtered according to the kosher slaughter process. And what this means is that the meat sold in most of our supermarkets should not be on the menu for followers of Yeshua, and this includes all the footage of meat that you've seen in this video.
Another thing that we should consider is making sure that meat and dairy products are not cooked together or eaten at the same time. In Exodus 23:19, 34:26, and Deuteronomy 14:21 in our English Bibles, it says, "You shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk." If this translation is to be taken at face value, one could be sure that as long as they didn't boil a young goat in its mother's milk, they could continue eating cheeseburgers. According to the Hebrew, however, the prohibition in these verses is a little broader. The word translated as boil could just as easily be translated as the word cook, which itself has a general meaning. In other words, the exact mode of cooking is not in view. Similarly, the Hebrew word that is here translated as young goat is actually broader and could be used to refer to other land animals. Knowing this, the verse could be translated this way: "You shall not cook the offspring of land animals in its mother's milk." Practically speaking, however, this verse is not referring to actually placing the meat of an animal in a pot and taking the milk of its mother and cooking it together. It's referring to cooking meat with dairy altogether. This is the way the Jewish community has understood this commandment for thousands of years. In fact, the Targums, the Aramaic paraphrases of the first century, indicate that this prohibition was understood to prohibit cooking land animals with dairy. For example, the Targum Onkelos paraphrased each instance of this prohibition as follows: "Thou shalt not eat flesh with milk." This means that Yeshua and the apostles more than likely honored this interpretation and did not cook or eat meat with dairy. Today, Orthodox Judaism has also prohibited cooking and eating poultry with dairy. While there is certainly nothing wrong with adding this additional fence, as followers of Yeshua, it's important for us to at least make this distinction between what is commanded by God and what was added later as a fence by man. Nevertheless, it would appear that God did prohibit cooking and therefore eating the meat of land animals with dairy. So it looks like cheeseburgers are off the menu for followers of Yeshua. There's much more we could look at in regards to keeping kosher, but these are the basics. For more information, including an in-depth explanation of the meat and dairy issue, I recommend that you visit the website biblicalkosher.alittlehebrew.com, which is not associated with Messianic Niagara, but we find it to be a very helpful resource for followers of Yeshua in regards to keeping kosher. Additionally, you can contact us at contact@messianicniagara.com for more information as well. So how can one begin to keep kosher? Well, I'd like to introduce you to one of the easiest first steps all believers can take. You've probably noticed some of these symbols on the products that you buy in grocery stores. These are kosher symbols. Each one indicates a different agency that supervises the production of each product. Each agency holds to the strictest of Orthodox Jewish kosher standards. The most common symbols you'll see in the Niagara region are the COR, MK, the OU, the OK, and many more. If one simply purchases products with kosher certification, one can rest assured that at least the food that they are eating does not contain anything non-kosher. Of course, not every product in grocery stores has a kosher symbol. So you'll have to look in the fine print. Sometimes it's really clearly right at on the front of the product, but most products have a kosher symbol. Now in the Niagara area, it's tough to find kosher meat and kosher cheese, and a lot of the time it's tough to find kosher bread. So you can visit our website for some links to stores outside of the Niagara area that have as followers of Yeshua the Messiah, we know that our Master kept the Torah perfectly, that he didn't fail to keep any of his Father's commandments, and that includes the kosher laws. So maybe next time when we're at the supermarket, we should ask, what would Jesus eat?